In Argentina, tobacco unions in Jujuy denounced Governor Geraldo Morales for labor exploitation and nepotism. In Belgium, the third CELAC-European Union summit closed without consensus, in which the head of states of Latin America and the Caribbean demanded reciprocity and the elimination of the colonialist pressures towards the region. Russia offered to replace grain supply from Ukraine to needy countries free of charge after withdrawing from the grain deal. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Rosabal from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Argentina, tobacco unions in Jujuy denounced Governor Geraldo Morales for labor exploitation and nepotism. Residents of the town of Puerto Rico took to the streets to repudiate Morales, who participates in a political act in an industrial area dedicated to the processing of tobacco and commercial cannabis, along with Horacio Rodriguez Larreta, with whom he shares the presidential formula Together for Change. The demonstrators announced that one of Morales' sons runs an industrial cannabis business that hires families from Bolivia, paying less than the minimum wage. In this context, the governor had ordered a police operation to prevent the protesters from entering the event. In Colombia, 20 people have died and more than 14 are missing after a landslide in Catami sector in the department of Cundinamarca. Local media reported that the incident occurred in the early hours of Tuesday morning as a result of heavy rains. Local authorities also said that rescuers had found 6 people alive and were continuing to search for the missing, including several minors. In this context, following the heavy rains, several houses in the sector were affected, leaving an unspecified number of people affected. The landslide occurred near a toll station about 60 kilometers from the capital, Bogotá, and destroyed a road bridge. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the number of simultaneous heat waves in the northern hemisphere has increased falls in the 1980s, and the trend shows no sign of abating. The organization's warning comes at a time when several areas in the northern hemisphere are experiencing sweltering temperatures. Health authorities issued heat alerts in the United States, Europe, and Asia, and remind people to hydrate and protect themselves from the sun. According to experts, Europe is the fastest warming continent in the world. In addition to threatening the health of the population, high temperatures contribute to the generation of fires. The UN said that the increase in extreme weather events underlines the growing urgency of reducing greenhouse emissions. In Belgium, the third CELAC-European Union summit closed without consensus, in which the head of states of Latin America and the Caribbean demanded reciprocity and the elimination of colonialist pressures towards the region. During the closing ceremony, the need to stop the interference of other countries towards the region was stressed, in addition to the United States blockades against Cuba. Latin American leaders disagreed with European policies toward the region while expressing their neutral position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The head of states also rejected attempts to link the Latin American region to the NATO bloc against Russia, backing the principle of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace adopted at the second summit held in Havana. Also, in Belgium, social organizations and leaders of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe attended the closing event of the People's Summit, which ran parallel to the CELAC-European Union Summit. Several Latin American and European leaders spoke at the closing events, speaking in favor of the creation of a new multipolar world. The summit had previously issued a 9-point final declaration stating that at the time when the U.S. would like to have the world divided into state blocs disconnected and confronted with each other, the CELAC-European Union Summit provided a forum to advance relations in search of a peaceful world that is also capable of respecting Mother Nature. Furthermore, the declaration strongly rejected any political or military action aimed at interfering with the institutions and constitutional norms of any of the states participating in the summit, and condemned media campaigns geared at destabilizing democratically elected governments in Latin America and the Caribbean. At the closing of the People's Summit in Brussels, Bolivian President Luis Arce affirmed that his government is carrying out environmental work with respect for indigenous communities and the sustainable management of natural resources.
And therefore, we have the duty to respect our nature, the Mother Earth. We need to respect as well our resources. We need to defend the countryside, the country people, and the indigenous people. We also need to remember that we can't only care about the human well-being. We need to care and we need to take action also for the earth well-being.
Early on Tuesday, during his speech at the session of the European Union CELAC Summit, the President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, called to deepen alliances to improve the quality of life of the Caribbean and Latin American nations.
I firmly believe that we can and must build better relations, balanced, supportive, and cooperative to improve the lives of our peoples. Latin America and the Caribbean are no longer the backyard of the United States, nor are we former colonies that require advice, nor we will accept being treated as mere suppliers of raw materials. We are independent and sovereign countries with a common vision of the future. We are building the community of Latin American and Caribbean states as the unified and representative voice of our unity in diversity.
Cuban leader Miguel Díaz-Canel also called to discuss the growing flow of migrants and to respect the UN Charter of International Law.
To discuss migration-related issues in depth alarmed by the proliferation of hate speech, intolerance, exclusionary and xenophobic policies. To deal with the increasing flow of migrants from southern countries, we are concerned about the insistence on replacing the commitments to the United Nations Charter of International Law with a so-called international order based on rules that have not been negotiated, let alone agreed upon by all states.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, new dates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. And the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, spoke about the importance of integrated countries of both Latin American and European regions, and that history must not repeat.
Yesterday we said that history does not repeat. But in order to do that, we need to take into account a past event in order to prevent these events from happening again. We talked about the role of the countries in Latin America and the European Union. And the need for the Latin American countries to stay united. That is something that we need to do. We have talked about thoroughly about this topic, but we need to take action in order for it to happen.
Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez also called for cooperation to address the key challenges of the climate crisis.
A real willingness to work together to face the challenges of the climate crisis. You know that we are facing an unprecedented and irreversible phenomenon like the warming of the deep sea. What are we going to do together to deal with it? The blockade of Venezuela has also affected concrete projects of action to mitigate the effects effects of the climate crisis. It is not a problem of one country, it is a problem of all. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that if we do not face it as humanity, as peoples in union, we will not be able to overcome the main challenges that the peoples of the world are facing today.
Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil denounced that the application of sanctions is a brutal practice that violates human rights in order to bend the will of the people.
The European Union that defends human rights so much applies over Venezuela a brutal practice to bend the will of the people, and applies it with much more severity. It must also be said that the United States, when it attacks and confiscates our goods, when it confiscates us and eliminates any possibility of negotiation with our goods, it steals those goods.
Russia offered to replace grain supply from Ukraine to needy countries free of charge after withdrawing from the grain deal. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Tuesday that the details will be analyzed at the Russia-Africa summit to be held in St. Petersburg on July 27-28. Alexander Polyakov, deputy director of the Africa Department of the Russian Foreign Minister, revealed that so far Moscow has received confirmation from 49 countries to participate in the Russia-Africa summit. According to the official, this approach adopted by the countries of the continent demonstrates a firm commitment to the development of relations with Russia despite unprecedented pressure from the West. The Russian Defense Minister confirmed on Tuesday that its forces attacked Ukrainian forces facilities in Odessa with high-precision weapons.
At night, the armed forces of the Russian Federation delivered a global retaliation strike with high-precision sea-based weapons on facilities where terrorist acts against Russia were being prepared, using unmanned boats and also on the place of their manufacture at a shipyard near the city of Odessa. In the area of the cities of Mykolaiv and Odessa, fuel storage facilities with a total volume of 70,000 tons, from which military equipment of the armed forces of Ukraine was supplied with fuel, were destroyed. All assigned targets were struck, fires and detonation were recorded at the destroyed objects.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's more recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In South Africa, representatives from global political parties participated in a dialogue forum in the South African city of Ekurhuleni, a month ahead of the BRICS summit, which will be hosted in Johannesburg. Under the theme BRICS in Africa, Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development and Inclusive Growth, more than 54 political parties from around the world are participating in the forum. According to the African National Congress, the themes of the dialogue focus on global peace and security, inclusive multilateralism, strengthening the BRICS, and expanding their membership association to mutually accelerate growth and sustainable development.
Silencing of the guns in Ukraine, the achievement of genuine peace and the peaceful coexistence between Russia, Ukraine, and the neighborhood. We are fully behind the African Peace Initiative led by President Cyril Ramaphosa and the 7 other African heads of state and government to find a peaceful solution to the conflict by initiating dialogue between President Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky.
We do not want the war. However, those who actually stand behind Zelensky's regime, the USA and Western countries, do not want peace. They are doing everything to derail negotiations. We are grateful to the peoples of the world from all continents that they do not support illegal and criminal policy of sanctions against Russia.
Chadian leader General Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno has pardoned 110 more people sentenced to jail terms following daily protests against the regime last October. Demonstrations against the extension of Déby's transitional rule broke out last October in the capital N'Djamena and several other towns. Déby was proclaimed head of state by the army in April 2021 after the death of his father, Idriss Déby Itno, who was killed during an anti-rebels operation after ruling for 30 years. More than 600 young men, including at least 80 minors, were arrested in N'Djamena on October 20th and in the following days, and then sent to a prison in the desert town of Koro Toro. After months of detention, they were tried without legal representation, and more than half were sentenced to prison terms. Now, a total of 136 people convicted of taking part in last October protests have been now pardoned by China authorities in less than 4 months. On Tuesday, Japan Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited gas-rich Qatar to wrap up a Gulf tour centered on energy security and cooperations with Tokyo's main suppliers. The premier arrived in Qatar from the United Arab Emirates after starting his tour in Saudi Arabia, where he met the de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. During his tour, Kishida and Gulf leaders discussed how to deal with energy challenges in the face of unstable supply due to the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. Japan relies almost entirely on imports for its crude oil, with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar accounting for the bulk of its supplies. Prime Minister Kishida was making the first visit to Doha by a Japanese premier in 10 years.
Moreover, all three countries I visited have a strong willingness to transition away from their current economies, which heavily rely on exports for more than a half of their national revenue. Their aim to transform into exporters of decarbonized energy and diversify their economies and industries by leveraging their respective strengths of Gulf states and Japan. Through this collaboration, the Middle East oil-producing nations can be transformed into a global green energy hub, exporting decarbonized energy and critical minerals.
On Tuesday, President Xi Jinping held talks with Algerian President Abdelghani Tebboune, who is on a state visit to China at the Great Hall of the People. President Xi noted that this year marks the 65th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Algeria. 65 years ago, China and Algeria were brought together by the common cause of opposing imperialism and colonialism and seeking national independence and liberation. Since then, the two countries have helped each other through thick and thin and render mutual understanding and support each other. The two countries have been true friends and natural partners in the pursuit of common development and national rejuvenation, while China is advancing national rejuvenation on all fronts through a Chinese path to modernization. Algeria is pressing ahead with building a new Algeria. A nuclear-armed United States submarine arrived in the port of Busan on Tuesday as part of the Seoul-Washington bilateral new and consultative group talks in South Korea. The Bilateral Nuclear Advisory Group working meeting is the first of the Nuclear Deterrence Alliance, which President Yoon Suk-yeol said aimed to curbing the North Korea nuclear threat. The U.S. National Security Council's Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell confirmed the arrival of the submarine, while Pentagon spokesman reiterated the nuclear submarine is a reflection of commitment to its Asian ally. Senior officials from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan also will meet on Thursday in Japan to discuss the situation on the Korean Peninsula and ways to bolster trilateral cooperation. In the meantime, North Korea leader Kim Jong classified the talks as meeting openly discussing the use of nukes against Pyongyang. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Ana Rosabal. Thank you for watching.